All right, so a year ago at this time, we had to hear Kirby lecture us with his "you guys" stuff and all this, talking about how, even though Georgia was ranked number one coming into the college football playoff rankings, do you know how many of those teams won the national championship? Da 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 da. I know who won it last year, Kirby. I know who won it last year. And Georgia was ranked number one coming out of Jacksonville last year as the number one team. Bama was at two at 7-1. Michigan State 8-0. Oregon 7-1 at four. Five was Ohio State and Cincinnati, and Michigan at 6-7. So last year, if you were not in the top seven, you didn't make it into the playoff. This year, we don't know what it will be, but I'm going to tell you who I think it should be. I think it should go like this. I think it should go Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee, Michigan at four. After that, it kind of doesn't matter, but I would say Alabama at five, probably Texas Christian at six, Clemson or whoever else would be at seven. Why Georgia at one? Well, I think they either have the best win or the second best win of the season. They have a better win than Ohio State has. Tennessee has a better win than Ohio State has. So then it comes down to comparing, Georgia um, and Tennessee and Ohio State. I do not think Michigan. I think the only real three options you've got at one only. I think your best options at number one are, Georgia, Ohio State, and the Vols. I think if you go with any of them at number one, that's the completely. I think you can make a completely reasonable argument for any of those three to be at number one. Tennessee has the best win. They have the worst defense. Okay, Georgia has the best, or second best win, which is Oregon. So if you think Georgia's win over Oregon by 46 points, a team that's going to be ranked in the top 10, is better than Tennessee's win over the Vols, Tennessee's win over Bama on the last play of the game, which is a top 10 team, Alabama. If you think, if it's like a war shot, which one do you think is better? The only team that those two teams have played, this is amazing that we are at Halloween and Georgia and Tennessee have played one opponent that is exactly the same. That's the Gators. Tennessee beat Florida at home by five. Georgia beat the Gators by 22 on a neutral field. So, if you think Tennessee's the number one team in the country, I don't. I mean, I'm not gonna. There's no reason to die on any hills here, particularly because of the Georgia Tennessee thing. But this coming week, but there are rankings, and the TV masses must be satisfied. This is entertainment. That's the point. And if you're going to have the show, you got to produce the results. And so I think I think that they will probably not have Georgia number one. I think that either Ohio State or Tennessee will be ranked number one. But I would put Georgia at one because I mean, I've obviously watched them play all of their games. The one game they struggled against Missouri, that did not come down to the last play of the game. Tennessee has played two games that have come down to the last play of the game. They won both of them. Okay, that's pretty gutsy, frankly. Ohio State has probably played, the most decisive. You know, they've had the most decisive wins. Although Tennessee and Georgia both have had really decisive wins, but Ohio State has not had the schedule of the Dogs and Vols. Here's what Bill Conley, who I think has some brains over at ESPN, this is what he had to say about it, and I fall in this camp. Despite Tennessee's particularly brilliant performance Saturday against Kentucky, which was really good performance, Ohio State and Georgia have still done far more against their respective schedules than any other team has of date. We will see who has the edge in Tuesday's college football playoff rankings release, and with the number 2 and 3 teams playing next week, talking about Georgia and the Vols in his rankings, we will see who has the edge on the field too. Obviously, anyone who's watching this knows that Tennessee and Georgia are playing on Saturday. Did you know that we have an exclusive event with Kelee Ringo at Red Zone in Athens on November 10th? This is a limited availability event. that 100 people will not be in this event. That will not happen. So get your ticket today. Order it down there. You get a book included. Kelee will sign anything you want, and then you can also do some other stuff. But reserve your spot before these spots run out. Why Georgia? Why stick them? Oh, you're a homer. No, I mean, I think I've said on here more than a few times that I think Ohio State could be, should be number one, in the recent past. Um, we are at the point in the season where you got to add everything up, and you know, Georgia's looked as impressive as Ohio State, with the exception of the Missouri game, which is a little bit like saying, with the exception of the home game against Notre Dame, Ohio State's looked really good. People say, oh, they were really in a fight with Penn State late. Yeah, that happens. I mean, like, these teams aren't just gonna zip through everybody. They're not a buzzsaw. These guys, all you got to go out there and play. And when you're playing on the road, like like Ohio State did at Penn State, like Georgia did at Missouri, Tennessee, yeah, well, like Tennessee did against Pittsburgh. So it happens. You're gonna play road games where it's tough to play on the road. It is tough to play on the road. It's tough to play on the road. It's tough to play on the road. Why is it tough to play on the road? You cannot communicate verbally. It's very hard to do that. You have to go on signal. That immediately gives the defense an advantage. They know when the snap is coming. You can see, the head bobble of the center or the arm. So it gives a huge advantage to the home team. You saw that. I think you saw that in Tennessee's games against the Gators and Alabama. That kneeling crowd helped them tremendously to win those games. I don't think there's any confusion about the horseshoe being a major advantage for Ohio State. And Sanford Stadium, I mean, Georgia is very hard to play there. Ask Notre Dame, ask Auburn, or any of these other top 10 teams who have come into Athens and lost. It's tough to beat Georgia and Athens. It's tough to beat any good team at their joint. So when we take a step back and look at things, I do not think you can. Okay, there's going to be some red flags. Like the playoff committee is not going to know what they're doing if we see these things. If we see someone at one besides Ohio State, Tennessee, or Georgia, we got a problem. Those teams are clearly the best three teams. Michigan is clearly number 4. If we see someone other than those 4 teams in the top 4 team, we got a problem. You cannot put Clemson in front of Michigan. You cannot put Texas Christian in front of Michigan. You cannot do it. You cannot put Alabama in front of Michigan only because they lost the one game. Now, I reserve the right as we move forward to put Alabama in the top 4. I totally reserve that right because, Alabama has not died. I think Alabama should be your 5. Okay. Now, we've got a long way to go with this thing. We have just hit the start button. Last year, it's always good to know where things are or were. So Georgia was the one last year all the way until the actual playoffs started. We had Oregon as high as number 3 last year, late in the year, y'all. And then they lost that game to Utah where they just got punished. But going into the championship, the SEC championship weekend, the 4 teams were basically established, and it didn't matter that Georgia lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game. It didn't matter because they were all going. Ohio State, since Alabama essentially wanted to play in Dallas, it was irrelevant where those games were played. There was no advantage. There is, okay, now that we've got, let's just say, I mean, Clemson's certainly not eliminated, right? We have multiple teams that want to play in Atlanta. Georgia, clearly, Clemson, Alabama, Tennessee. They would all want to play in Atlanta, all of them. You would also get a situation. This is why the seeding might be more important, or certainly not might be. This is why the seeding is way more important this year. Ohio State would want to play in Atlanta unless they're playing the Dogs. Alabama, Michigan would want to play in Atlanta unless they're playing the Dogs. Michigan would want to play in Atlanta unless they're playing Clemson or Alabama or Tennessee. So this is just as an aside, some inside baseball. This is why the Big Ten is really complaining and trying to hold their own on the expansion because they really feel like all the playoffs are in the southern part of the country. They're right, but I can't help it that the Rose Bowl, which is the Big Ten's bowl game, it's in California, it's in Los Angeles. So I mean, there's sort of nothing we can do, but that's what they complain about. They're saying, "Hey, there is a logistical advantage for just being from the South." Well, I mean, uh, yeah, there is. And after experiencing Indianapolis in the winter, I would say we should never have a big event in the winter in the North ever. Period. End of story. That was not nothing the city could do about it. They don't. I mean, but it shouldn't be in those positions because you can't get around you can't get around the city. It's just too disgusting outside. It's too cold. You can't walk on the sidewalks without falling down. So um, this, the ultimate seeding that will matter is week 15. That's after the SEC championship game, but we're really at the beginning here. And Georgia, Tennessee, the winner will go to number one in week 11. So the I don't know if the loser would fall below Alabama or not. I mean, frankly, Georgia's played better than Alabama has this entire season. Tennessee beat Alabama, so I'm not sure how you could drop the loser of the game against in Athens this weekend below the four, but they can get dropped eventually in overtime. I mean, if Alabama wins the East, excuse me, wins the conference, they're going to the playoff, and they would deserve to.